Thank you guys for joining us this evening. My name is Drace Ryder, and I'm the Vice President of the Boys and Girls Club of the Pikes Peak region. I want to thank each of you for taking the time to participate and be a part of the conversation and the change that our world needs. I'd like to say thanks to USAA for their commitment to advancing racial equity and awarding us with a grant that has allowed us to create the Conversations That Count initiative to offer our club members and to the community. I'd like to introduce a couple of people. Dr. Regina Lewis. She is well known as a consulting partner, an international speaker, a virtual moderator, and CEO of Regina Speaking LLC. Dr. Lewis's proven specialty is leadership, professional excellence, cultural inclusion, entrepreneurship, executive coaching, strategic development, and executive public speaking coaching. Regina holds a doctorate in educational leadership, research, and policy, a Master of Arts in Communication, a Bachelor of Arts in Communication, and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. Regina's work in the area of diversity and inclusion has become an award-winning program. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Regina Lewis to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. It's outstanding. We're in for a great treat tonight. So this is part of a series that's going to be going on for the rest of the year. It's part of the Conversations That Count. And so that's really exciting. And I'm glad to be a part of that. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker for tonight. This is Shirley Martinez. And Shirley Martinez, she has her own business. It's Bridging Connections. However, I'd like to say that she is the triple CS, which is the connector, the community connector of Colorado Springs. This is the woman to know. If you don't know Shirley Martinez, you need to know her now. She's also the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director at Pikes Peak Library District. She's a retiree twice, once from the Colorado Springs Utilities and then also from the military. So thank you for your service. Actually, I'd like to say thank you for my freedom. So I appreciate that. But she has a great talk for us this evening. It's going to be very interactive. And what we're going to ask you to do at the end is actually do a small project that you're going to do. And then you're going to give it to the Boys and Girls Club. I think you're going to like it, though. So, Shirley, it's all yours.
Thank you, Miss Regina. As always, you've been spectacular in giving us our housekeeping notes and do's and don'ts. But I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today, because I'll be giving you information, but it's really a conversation that many of us actually do have with our children, but sometimes, and I know for myself too, we sometimes miss the mark of what we really should be helping or saying. And I did this research and gosh, I found out so much, especially because I've raised 4 kids and I'm now raising 16-year-old grandsons who are biracial. So, you know, how to explain racism to our youth. And this could be from our young kids of 3 or 4 to our kids up to 18 and beyond. And it's also part of kind of understanding ourselves, because it does change sometimes, changes a little bit, but there's also certain parts and granules of racism that have always been there. So I'm going to let you know that whether you're a person of color or white, it is important. And I'm going to start the slideshow. So if you can't see it, please make sure you have and let Shannon know inside the chat room. Oops. Can you see it? If you can raise your hand. Okay, fantastic. So again, whether you're a person of color or white, it is important to start talking to your youth about race and racism. How we got here can help to create a much needed dialogue to help ensure that you're informed and sensitive to a child's maturity level. To address this difficult topic, this is important to work to help our youth understand the world around them and prepare for the difficult experiences that they may face. With the current societal climate, parents, caregivers may be wondering, should I have the talk with my kids? Exactly which talk is it? I broached the subject to several individuals and asking them, should we have the talk with the kids? And because we mostly have teenagers, they thought I was talking about the birds and the bees. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the talk of racism. So the goal is raising our children who are actively anti-racist contributors to society. So ensuring that our children will be able to be good stewards in our society with the understanding of racism. To many, this is likely, it seems daunting. It's a daunting responsibility. And some might argue that there's color blindness, that we're all humans, or race is a social construct. I don't know how many times I've heard that, I don't see color in you, and to me, it's just someone telling me that they really don't understand that there is color in me. The consequences of racism on the lives of people of color. There's an author called Ibram Kendi, and he defines racism as a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas that produces and normalizes racial inequities. And this book is called How to Be an Anti-Racist. So what you look at is racist ideas confer superiority to one race or over another, solely based on skin color. And it's well known that children's awareness of this racism starts early. So discussing race and racial differences and racism with children is good. And it's good for their mental and emotional health, especially since we've been in the pandemic. So exactly which is it that we talk about? Racial identity and awareness. Oops, trying to shift. So awareness. Let's go over research. Research has shown that babies are young as 3 months old. They look at our faces that match the race of their caregivers. I can say this because I just met my new granddaughter at 3 weeks, and she looked at me. And she looked at me, but previous to that, she heard my voice because I used to talk to her when she was in the belly of my daughter-in-law. But when I went to see her a week ago, she immediately looked at me because she heard me. And then she identified me with who I was. So every time I came around, she was always looking for me. At 6 months old, they noticed physical differences associated with race. So it could be hair, it could be talk, it could be songs, it could be any of those things. By toddlerhood, children's behavior choices according to race have been documented even more clearly because they start listening and emulating what they see or hear. Again, by 30 months of age, most children use race to choose playmates because they hear and see what either friends, family are doing, and they emulate that. And by kindergarten age, children have already learned that some groups in our society are imparted higher status than others. And no better than if you've seen the, not the training, but the video of Brown Eye, Blue Eye, where they did the experiment of the color of your eyes and segregating children by that. Or there was the video and training on how children used, they used dolls to show which dolls were better, the black or the white dolls. So again, this is another way that at an early age, we could start telling that children knew that the black doll was bad and the white doll was good, because they're seeing and they're hearing. And it's a difference now because kids are seeing and hearing things because of the internet, social media, YouTube, TikTok. How young are our kids on their laptops and iPhones? And how many times, and Shanna, you can see how many people are raising their hands. Have you seen somebody in a restaurant, in a grocery store, on the bus, hand their phone over to their young child to engage them by putting on a video or a movie or something to keep them engaged instead of actually engaging with them and talking to them? Stacy, I see you raised your hand. How often have you seen this? You have to unmute yourself.
I see it quite often. Just even at work, my coworkers, it's just different, just from appearance.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so our children emulate what they see. And if we're just handing them something and not talking them about what they're seeing, what they're reading, what they're watching, then they never really learn. So that's about awareness. And also remaining silent about it. Remaining silent about racial identity. While it's well-meaning, it inadvertently contributes to racism because it reinforces the idea that differences can be scary and is a taboo topic. So let's go on. Effects of our youth. Racial trauma refers to any kind of experience in which a person experiences discrimination or violence based on their racial identity, which can include the following: threats of harm, witnessing harm to others, jokes or negative statements, being denied a service or seeing someone being denied a service, receiving less access or low quality service compared to others. So, for instance, again, seeing a lot that's happening on TV with the shootings, the riots, various other things. Kids are watching this. They're seeing this. It was a different time back in the 50s and 60s, because during that time, there were churches, there were groups, the NAACP, that pulled together, and they were all together. And now there are groups that are trying to work to fill that gap, but we got a lot of work to do. Because of COVID, it has separated us in how we help our kids understand what's happening today. Stacey, you have your hand raised. Do you still want to say something?
No, do I put it down?
Yeah, you have to put it down.
Yeah.
So, we've heard a lot about kids having mental issues and stress because of COVID, because they're home, they're not with their friends, their parents are either working or they're home, they're stressed out, people have lost their jobs. So what they're seeing on TV and what they're showing in TikToks and I can tell you, YouTube, because I see my grandsons using it, is a huge inhibitor of our youth because they see it. And I've asked my grandkids, so when you are watching something and you see that there is issues of racial tension, what do you think is going on in that YouTube or TikTok? And they say, well, some of them are people having fun, and some of them are ones that people are doing things they probably shouldn't be doing, Grandma. Well, and so I've had those conversations with my grandsons, so they know what they're looking at and how to interpret it, or come to me and ask me about how to interpret it. I gave them an example that when I was in 5th grade, I was an Air Force brat. My father was Air Force. I really had never been in the United States. We traveled to Japan and Hawaii and all these different places. But I got my first taste of racism in Waycross, Georgia. As a youth, my great aunt took me to a grocery store, and she told me I was not allowed to touch anything on the shelves. I was not allowed to drink out of the water fountain because there was signs that said colored and white. I was not allowed to speak out unless I was spoken to. Now, these things were foreign to me. I had never had to deal with that. When I told my grandsons this, they were just like, really, Grandma? You went through that too? And I said, at that time, I did not know the significance of what I experienced until I got older. And I started seeing that the things that my great aunt was teaching me were the things of racism to keep us divided. Because I went to an all-Black school for 6 months while we lived there, while my dad was TDY, and I learned
I think she just lost connection.
Okay, hold on. I'm sure she'll be right back. Okay.
Oh, did it go off?
It did.
Yes, it did. It went off for a second. So let me go back on. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So these are some of the effects on our youth. These symptoms that I talked about before about their mental and the stresses that they have. These experiences of this trauma have the kids feeling like they don't have a safe place to be in this world, and that we have to continue to check on them to make sure they're safe. Most kids try to avoid people or places. Kids will not go to a place that they've seen that has had the trauma. They will choose to do something different or something else. Why the talk? Why is the talk needed? They need the guidance to understand the racial traumas that they experience or witness in society. By having these conversations about racial and cultural pride, children feel more prepared for any potential racial trauma experiences and are better protected from any negative effects which such experiences might have on their mental health. And they will be more likely to come and tell you and have these conversations with you. And you want that. I can tell you, half my grandson's basketball team, they come and talk to me about different things because they feel comfortable with me. And I don't sugarcoat it, but I do call their parents and tell them, your child has come to me about this. Do you feel comfortable with me talking to them? Would you like to have this conversation with them? Would you like to do the conversation with me and you? Or would you like to have this conversation with just me for them? Which I feel is appropriate. Because if they don't feel like they're able to, I want the kids to feel comfortable that they're coming to somebody so that we are aware of something and that something else or dangerous doesn't happen. So I just feel that it's so important that we now have to really start having these conversations with our kids, because COVID has distanced them from any kind of guidance, real guidance that they need during this time. So let's talk about, you see the phones, they're old school phones. Because I'm talking about, this isn't a conversation that you're going to have on a phone or a text or something like this with the TV on blasting and, you're having this conversation, and everything else is going on and they're not paying attention. How do you have that talk? The race method. Recognize your own biases and knowledge. Awareness, A. Increase your and your child's awareness of differences. curiosity. Be curious and learn about other cultures and experiences of others. Celebrate those differences. And that doesn't mean that you have to do a lot of celebrations in your home. This community provides many celebrations and opportunities, and you've got libraries, and you've got, you know, as Patrice says, in the Southeast side, they're doing so much over there, and in 719 and up north, there are many things that are going on where if you don't feel comfortable, there are those out there that are already doing it that you can tap into. E, engagement. Engage your child in open and honest conversations about race and racial differences. Encourage them to strive to be anti-racist individuals. And that doesn't mean that I'm telling you that they need to pick up a sign, go out there and beat the streets. What I'm telling you is teach them the right way that they can become individuals that have a voice. So when we talk about the race method, children between the ages of 0 and 3, the intention is not to enter into a lengthy lecture about race and racism, but to normalize the conversations about race, being aware of how comfortable with acknowledging whomever you're talking to's limitations and knowledge. Moments in these ages, you want to notice, have them notice that there are differences, and to start discussing those differences by setting the stage to model a positive behavior and attitude. So for instance, you and Eric have different skin colors. One is lighter, one is darker, but both skin colors are beautiful. So you're not delineating that one is better than the other. So if you have preschool, which is 3 to 5, you want to emphasize the value of diversity and celebrate those differences. For example, no one looks the same. We all are different and can't look the same, but that makes it more fun. And stress how everyone is different and everyone is important, and that no one is better than anyone else. And that's why I said these are conversations where the TV is not involved. It's between you and them having this conversation. And then start talking to them about hurtful behaviors, because at this point in their life, and this would be kindergarten, some first grade, there are hurtful behaviors that happen in these classes when they go to school. Specific examples of that are you be playing with your friends and someone says something to you that hurts your feelings. And you talk to them about being respectful and treating everyone kindly. And so I know someone said once, well, you want people to treat you like you treat them. I said, you know, I don't use that anymore, because I can be really, really mad at you one day. And I could be
game's
really,
answer.
and so, but what you want to do is have that respectful conversation that you do want to be treated respectfully. If you have kids ages 6 to 12, you can have more more heavy discussions about it. You can start talking about how people are treated differently because of skin color or economic status or any of those things. You can have conversations about the actions that they have if they do say something to someone, what those actions mean, how somebody can feel, and what are some of the ramifications of that. You can explore ideas about making signs and drawing pictures and reading books. You can read a book together. You could watch a movie together. And then after you do that, you can have these conversations. I can tell you, when the twins were younger, we would watch a movie, and afterwards we would sort of like have a conversation about it naturally. Not that I had up, because I am OCD like that. I didn't have a list of questions that we could go over, but I did go through, hey, well, what did you think about that movie? What stood out to you? And just having those kind of conversations. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to ask anybody if they do something like this now, and what has been the results. So you can raise your hand, and Shanna can see who's out there. No one?
Shirley, can you repeat that question just to make sure?
Yes. So what I'm asking is everything that I've said so far about, things that you can do in conversation with children. Has anybody had these conversations with their kids? Not necessarily what I've stated, but in some other manner. And what was it? And what do you think the outcome was? And it doesn't have to be your children. It could be your niece or nephew or something like that. Anyone?
Shirley, I'll jump in. I don't think I have anything profound to say, but I am a mother of a biracial daughter. And I think some of the experiences we have are her recognizing so many differences, and that fear as a parent, you don't want them to experience what you've experienced. And so sometimes those starter conversations, or like, how do you approach it, have been, difficult. Like, what do you say and how do you, because you don't want your kids to be, you don't want them to feel like, oh, I'm the one that's different. And
Right.
more of a question, Shirley, but my daughter consistently sees the differences in people, and I think that's beautiful. I want her to see that, but I also don't want to have that conversation of, well, this is kind of how the world sometimes sees you, and when you're not reflected back in a community like Colorado Springs, sometimes that is going to come up more often. So I guess a question for you is offering, like, what are some starter questions, or what are some to soften this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Children.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say number one, because I'm raising biracial grandsons, and majority of my grandkids are biracial and my kids are biracial, is I start out by asking them what they would do differently. And, what do they feel that, especially if there's something that happened, because I've had this conversation multiple times with my kids and my grandkids, is the softening is, why do you think something like this could be happening? And then having that conversation about it. And, getting them to understand just because they're different doesn't mean that they're not respected and that they're not worthy of the things that they're doing. So I would say, I think that's the most difficult one. And Patrice, you hit the nail on the head. I can't tell you how many times I have different parents that have biracial children, especially if they're mothers that are white. What do I do with my son is asking me questions, who looks Black but doesn't look like me? And I always go back to them and I said, well, it is your son. So how are you going to help your son understand that his color, although in some eyes could be a detriment, and there could be some racism, but how are you going to get him to understand that he still has rights and he still, can utilize those rights? So it's having those deep conversations. And again, not being scared to have those conversations, because at some point, depending on the age of the child, and I'm going to say, when you get into like 4th and 5th grade, there are already things that have happened. Kids may not have told us, but there are things that have happened. And so you don't want to be too blunt, but you want to be blunt enough that they're going to open up to you. Right. And you guys have that good conversation about it. And that's what I do with the twins, because one of their questions to me was, it was on a, SAT something, and they had to put what race they were. And they're Hispanic and Black. And they said, Grandma, do I put white or do I put Black because I'm Hispanic? And so I said, you get to choose. And I said, and if you do not, is there a block that says other? And they said, yeah, there's a block that says other. And I said, you get to choose. I said, I'm not going to define you for who you are. I said, you know your heritage, you know your nationalities. And I said, and I want you to be comfortable when you're going and talking to people about who you are in making that decision. Now, when they're younger, because I do have younger grandkids, that conversation is a little bit harder, Patrice, because they're aware, but slightly not aware. Because I do have grandkids that have light colored hair and blue eyes and are light complected. And they believe that they're Black. And so, you know, just being open to have the conversation and being able to, like I said, I'm not going to say be blunt, but it has to be that conversation now, especially now that we've had all these kids that have been, you know, shot. I mean, let's be real. Just the recent span of them, I've had another talk with my grandsons about race, responsibility. And I really believe it's about responsibility, that we have to give them the ownership of the responsibility to make good choices and understand. So I believe in your question, Patrice, I think that's where it is. Depending on their age, we have to give them that responsibility and be there for them to answer questions, and always asking them questions, not maybe pointed, but my grandkids say, Grandma, you're getting in our business. But what I look at it as is, no, I'm not getting in your business. I just want to make sure there's anything that you need to ask me, or there's anything that's going on that, you know, you think I need to know. Tell me. And it's not about, when they tell you something, getting angry and, you know, talking to them as if you're punishing them, because that's not what this is about. And I think we have to stop getting away from these conversations as punishment, that it's more, like I said, of these conversations that we're having, and we're sitting down and being able to use resources, watch videos together, looking at books, because there's lots of books out there now, and having these conversations. And I think as the kids get older, you need to have these conversations once a week, just to get a little idea of what's going on in their world, because there's just so much going on with COVID and what's happening with them at school, and you know, you're trying to keep up with missing assignments and things like that, that you do have to do that check-in. And that check-in could just be, how was your day? Was there anything interesting that happened? And, you know, and they could like tell you something that, you know, and listen for the things that aren't obvious, because they could tell you a bunch of stuff and gloss over something that could be really important. Like I'm going to give you an example. Yeah, our day was great. And, you know, one of our teachers, you know, they went and did so-and-so, and then another person. And then there was this big fight, and it was this, you know, this big Black kid, and it was another white kid, and they were fighting and calling each other names. And then, you know, and then they're going on to something else. And then we saw a movie, and then we went to lunch, and then I'm like, now what happened today? I said, and were you there? Well, yeah. And I said, what was the fight over? Do you know? Oh yeah, it was over blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, when did it start getting into the racial interaction? And they're like, oh yeah, Grandma. It was when the one person called the other person something bad. And they won't say like it was this, they'll say it was bad, Grandma. And I said, so how did that make you feel? And he said, well, I wanted to fight too, but I knew you would get mad. But, you know, it's having those conversations that can help the kids. And so we'll get to 13 and 18, which is, you know, more messages about race. You know, when you see a sign that you're driving on the highway and you see a sign, that could be a conversation. When you're in a grocery store and you're seeing something that's happening, that could be a conversation. But it's always being able to have just these little conversations about things that may seem insignificant, but they're huge. They're huge. And then getting books, having them read books. My grandkids are required to read books, and I go pick them out together, because I don't want them coming back with a comic book or a book, a basketball book full of pictures or something like that, but something that's meaningful. And then I have them share the book with me. So they have to come back after they're done reading it, and they have to tell me about what it's about. And that helps with the literature too, because then I know that they're actually reading. So I want to get to the next thing. So does anybody have any questions about what I've talked about right now, about the race, and then about having these conversations with your kids and how important it is? Any hands? Anything in the chat room? I saw there was some stuff in the chat room.
To your earlier question, Regina and Drace had raised their hands, but apart from that, nothing. Oh wait, there.
Okay.
This one.
Well, if they would like to.
So Patrice asked, how do you approach healing from any level of trauma that has happened to your children based on bias and race?
I would say get a little help from a counselor. Talk to a counselor before you talk to your child. And then when you do talk to your child, you're now equipped with ways of explaining whatever happened or not, because sometimes you don't have all the information, but it's helping guide the child through the trauma in understanding and learning how they need to live life day to day, because it may change their whole perspective, and you may change how you're talking to them, you know, until they're healed. That's why I said there's a lot of mental and stress going on with kids right now because of COVID and not being able to be with their friends, because usually kids are talking to their friends, their friends are helping them through things. They don't really have that right now. And so kids don't like to tell us a lot of stuff. So I can tell you, my grandkids went through some trauma in Texas before I got them. And when I did get them, they were very quiet. They talked, but I noticed there was this part of them that was very standoffish, that I couldn't like get in, like they wouldn't let me in. And I went and talked to a therapist about it, of how I could help them. And she gave me some pointers about not making them tell me, but just providing those opportunities when they start to give a little information. Don't dig, but just be a good listener. And then after they open themselves up a little bit, I then made the decision that they did need to go to a counselor, somebody that was not family, because sometimes us as family, we have our blinders on too. And so we don't hear what they're saying. We hear what we want them to be doing or changing. And so sometimes you need that outside voice that can help the child move on. And it helps us move on too. I saw a question. Does that help, Patrice?
Thank you, Shirley. Very powerful. Appreciate you.
Mm-hmm. I think there was somebody was saying something. And just so you know, I was an LPC, I was a licensed professional counselor for Fort Carson, and I did social work services. So I did do family and teen counseling. No questions? Okay. So I want to show you a powerful video I found, and it's based out of the Bronx in New York, and it's kids talking about racism and segregation. And so everything that I've talked about right now, as you hear the kids, be thinking about, you know, because you've been in other places where you've heard kids talking, whether it's a restaurant, a grocery store, any other place. You've heard conversations, but listen to how the kids, when they see something or they hear something, what they say. So I'm going to start that next. Oops. Sorry, I have to move this so I can start it.
segregation is when black and white are separate and not together. Children of color and white children are separated. There are two different schools, and one is for black people and another one is for white people. Segregation happens, but it's not like happening as bad as it did before, because before it used to be even worse. In my class, there's Julia, and she's white, and there's me. Well, my cousin named Milana, she used to go to a Catholic school. Well, she felt awkward because she was the only black person. The only other people from the Middle East in the school is my cousins. Because some people might decide to fit in with the people of the opposite race, but some people might not feel comfortable around people that isn't part of their race. I've been to a school named PS85, so there were separate classes, English and Spanish. So it wasn't really fair because before I didn't know any English. I only speak Spanish. I have a sister. She goes to a Catholic school, and her name is Hennessy. And it's a school for rich people, and she had an opportunity to go, but you don't really see a lot of colored people, but there still is, but there's more white people that you see in the school. One main reason I think that is because of the money too. Private schools tend to be more expensive. I think that schools are segregated based on where you live, because people of color live with people of color and white people live with other white people. My mom was looking at a school for me to go to, and the population for whites was really large and the blacks were really small. I think one of the reasons they did that was because number one, they still think whites are better, and number two, because segregation is illegal and they still feel like whites are better, they want mainly white people, but having one or two black people and a couple Latino, it makes them seem like not totally white. Well, I think diversity is good because we won't only have people that are from your culture. You have different people, you could talk to different people. You won't be talking to the same people.
Oops. So that's very, very powerful. What I can say is these are the conversations our kids are having. These are fifth graders, and this is current. And so we have to be aware because it's happening. And with everything that's going on in the world right now, and especially with equity issues, this is going to be an ongoing discussion. These are kids, and this is what they're saying. Imagine what adults are saying. So we talked earlier about a grow model, a goal, something that we wanted you to do. So here's the assignment. The goal, which is to aim, set long or short-term aims. The objective, specific objective for your goal. And what we would do is we're going to send you this PowerPoint so you have these, so you don't have to kind of rush and write them. The next one is your reality, an assessment. You do, oops, sorry. Reality, okay. The reality, doing a self-assessment and or project assessment. Examples, provide examples of results. Assumptions, avoid or check assumptions. Discard irrelevant history. You know, because I know I'm a writer too. Patrice, I think you understand. We love to write a good story and have all the nice, pretty stuff in there, but we need to you need to like really like make it relevant. The next one is options, obstacles. Examine the obstacles that challenges your progression. Opportunities, identify the positive impact. Way forward, actions, commit to this action. You want to plan your steps and you want to define the specific steps and timing of the milestones. Do I have any questions? Well, I hope everybody has gotten something out of this today. And I wanted this to be, you know, because sometimes we do take training where we gloss over the most important pieces, and we really got to talk about it. If you want to do these classes, you really got to talk about racism. You can't put it in a closet and you can't hide it. It is what it is.
All right. Thank you so much, Shirley. We appreciate your time and commitment to be here tonight. We truly appreciate you and your expertise.